Welcome, chess friends. Today I'm going to discuss a rook on the 7th rank, and we're going to look at step 4 and step 5, and it's part of, you could say, rook activity. And we have a position here in front of us by one of my students. He's rated about 1300. He's on the white side, white is to play, and in this position he played the move f3 to prevent any back rank checkmates. But of course, the move f3 allows the move rook d2. And let's have a look at rook d2 and why that is such an active move, right? So you have a rook on the 2nd or the 7th rank. So it's an active piece in enemy territory. It ties the king to the back rank. It cannot be attacked by pawns. It attacks pawns on the 2nd rank actually, so the pawn on c2 is under attack. It limits the activity of the enemy pieces, and there are some tactical motives, like mate with support of your own or enemy pieces, and mate after elimination of defenders. And then later on we will also look at gaining access to the 7th rank by elimination of defenders, and we will start off with some positional aspects of the rook on the 7th rank. So in this position, right, you would expect white to defend the pawn on c2 with rook c1, and then for instance after king e6, f4, c5, white is still winning, but suddenly it requires technique. It's not evident anymore. So this all could have been avoided by playing rook d1, and then the win is relatively easy to counter the threat of rook d2. So let's have a look at some positions where we can see this positional advantage. So again, white is to play. We see the rook on the 7th rank. The rook on f8 is tied to the defense of the pawn on f7. The king is on h8, so also the rook cannot take the pawn, the a pawn, because that would be mate on the back rank. So it's jailing the black king, and we can see how this evolves, right? White keeps the king in the jail, keeps the rook tied to the back rank, and this allows for an easy win, right? On the next move, white will play rook b7 followed by rook b8 and support the pawn promotion. So this is the positional side, you could say, where you can see how the king is restrained and how it is cramping the pieces. This is another example, right? Black is to move, defends their pawn on c7, and white is actually free to bring up the king, but you can see, right, black doesn't want to play king f8, rook takes h7, and now white just advances their pawn, and black is in zugzwang and has to give up c7 and is losing. So white could have won by bringing the king, but actually with pawn play was sufficient to bring black into zugzwang and to win the game. So these were two examples of positional play. So one of the themes on the tactical side is mate. So this is a puzzle, and can you find a way to create a mate for white? And it's important, right, to start with the move rook a7, king b8, now we have some freedom. Rook b7, king c8, a6. So the a pawn supports the two white rooks to mate. And after g2, rook a8 is checkmate. So let's go back. Rook a7 was the winning move. Can you see why a6 is actually losing, right? So you could say, why is the move order important and why is a6 losing and rook a7 followed by a6 winning? Because after a6, black can defend the square a7 with bishop g1. And then the black pawns decide the game. So this is the first example where one of our own pieces supports the mating threat. This is an example I really like because a lot of students have difficulty finding here the solution. So let's orient ourselves, right? White is close to promotion, a7, a8. And how to win this position. And a lot of players would start with checking the king, right? Rook f2, and then king goes to g1, and then rook g2, and check and check and check to make it happen. But the way to solve this puzzle is by thinking about, I have one move, because I have to wait for a7, a8, so that's the move I have that I can make. And I have to find a configuration that is mate. And this configuration, this mating configuration, can you find it? Because then it's relatively easy to solve it. So you think about the end state, the configuration, and you don't think about the next move. And then you find out, right, if I have a rook on f7, on f2 and a rook on g1, that would be a configuration that is mate. And then you find the first move, which is rook g2, and after a8, rook b to f2, and rook g1 checkmate. And now we're going to examples where we have an opponent piece that is actually helping in allowing the mate. So let's have a look, right? We have two rooks on the 7th rank, and the knight on c8 is defending. And if we would play queen takes c8 immediately, the king would take, and suddenly the king has three squares, a8, b8 and c8, and there's no forced mate. Also, we have to take into account that white doesn't have a lot of time because the queen on d3 is threatening mate on the back rank, and the knight on c8 is attacking the rook on d7, e7. So the right order to do this is to play rook b7, and after king a8 we take, and we are eliminating the defender that was defending a7, and we create a block for the king, that the king can no longer go to c8. So this configuration with a piece on c8 or f8 is quite common with a rook on the 7th rank and a common tactical motive. So let's have a look at this position. So again, if you look at the position, black wants to play a2, a1, white is to move. We have to find a way to mate the black king. And then let's start with check. And again, we are going to block the escape of the king by putting an opponent's piece on f8. And another way to find this is to do two moves with the same color, with white, and mate the king. And then, of course, you could play knight takes f6, rook h7, but you can also play knight f8, knight g6. And knight f8 forces the rook to take on f8, and now we created the block again for and taken away the escape square of the king. So we had two examples where one of our own pieces was supporting the mate, and now we have two examples where we use blocking to create the mate and put an opponent's piece on f8. This is a very nice one. Right, so let's see what's going on. And what is the winning continuation? It would be very tempting, right, to play something like queen takes h6, threatening mate on h7. But how do we continue then after queen h8? So what is the right way to win this position? Queen d7 is the start, queen h8. What is the threat after this move? Right, the threat is rook f8, and after king takes f8, queen f7, and after rook takes f8, queen h7. So there are two mating ideas with queen d7. So queen h8 defends against the mate on h7. We attack the queen goes away, and now we block the king from going to h8, and we have our mate queen f7. So again, a mate by putting a piece of the opponent on an escape square of the king. Of course, it can also be more straightforward. So in this position, what would you play, right? You think two moves with the same color and mate would be knight f3, knight h2. So what do we play? Of course, we have to be careful, because after knight f3 immediately there's queen takes h7 checkmate. So that would lose the game. So what we do is first trade, and after the trade we play knight f3, and we see this cooperation between the rook and the knight. A rook on the 7th rank also, of course, allows a lot of tactics. So how to win here with white? Right, the knight is covering g7, so we don't have rook f7, king g8, rook g7. So how to win? Can you find the solution in this case? So the win starts with rook f7, we force the king there, we threaten mate in 1. The king returns, and now we have an X-ray attack on the king on e8 and the rook on h8. Sometimes, of course, we don't have access yet to the 7th rank, like in this position. And who is the defender of the square d7? It's the knight on b6. How can we eliminate that defender? Of course, we can play the move c5, but then the knight goes to d5, blocking the entry of the rooks. So can you find a way to get rid of this knight? And the solution here is like a non-forcing move, bishop c3, with the idea of bishop a5, right? And you can say, but now we don't have access anymore. But you can see, right, if black tries to counter, we take, Black takes back, and after rook a5, king c7, we have c5 winning the knight. So bishop c3 threatens bishop a5, eliminating the defender, and black cannot defend by playing rook d8. And also, let's say after a move like rook e8, with the idea of rook e7, we play bishop a5, and now there's the threat of c5, so black doesn't have time to play a move like rook e7. And this is, I think, very common, of course, and pretty straightforward, but it is, again, sometimes you have to prepare the access for the rook on the 7th rank, and without thinking, a lot of players, of course, would play here bishop b6 to infiltrate on the next move with the rook on the 7th rank. So let's have a look at this position. So again, we have, you could say, a mating potential here. And when we do the orientation of this position, 2 rooks on the 7th rank, right? But the king has escape squares, right? We cannot play a rook g2 followed by king h1 and then rook h2 and then mate, because the king can go to f1. But black has 2 threats, right? There's a rook b1, but that's defended by rook f1, right? And we have the threat of on the 2nd rank itself. So we found out that the rook on f3 has a central defending task. That rook is tied to the defense of the square f1, which means that that rook is not defending another crucial square. And that square is g3. That allows us to play knight g3, because after rook takes g3 there would be rook b1 with mate. And the other threat, of course, if black plays, right, so we said rook g3, rook b1 with mate. And if white does not take the knight, but plays something else, like rook d7, we have rook g2 mate. So this is another example of a supporting piece, and also an example of exploiting the vulnerability of a piece that has a central defending task, a piece that is tied up to a specific role. And here, let's see what's going on. We have a queen on the 7th rank, and again we have multiple pieces that are tied up to a specific role. So we have a queen on b8 that is tied up to the defense of this rook, and we have a bishop that is tied up to the defense of the square g7. So in a way both cannot play, which makes one square available, which looks like it's not a safe square, but actually is, because 2 pieces have a central defending task. It allows us to play a rook c7. What is rook c7 threatening? Mate on h7, bishop e4 defense, and now we can attack one of the pieces with a crucial defending task by playing bishop g3 and leading to a mate. So this whole combination was based on realizing which pieces are tied up to the defense of other pieces, and then realizing that c7 is not defended because of that, and then finally eliminating one of the pieces that has a central defending task by playing the move bishop g3. So this is actually from step 3, but it is also about the 7th rank, right? So black is to move, there's a bishop on g4, and what do we play, right? We don't want to go to h5, because after g4 this bishop is really bad, but also we don't want to play bishop d7, because after bishop d7, right, white can gain access to the 7th rank by playing bishop a6 again, like we had previously, gaining access by playing bishop b6, attacking the rook on, in that case, d8. Now we have a similar situation. So in this position, it's really critical for black to play rook takes c1, rook takes c1, rook c8, before moving the bishop away. So the rook is undefended, right? And now, after if the rook moves away, we have control over the c-file. And if white trades, then we have an equal position. So the whole idea in this position is that we have to be aware of the threat of white gaining access to the 7th rank by playing bishop a6, and we can avoid that by first trading the rooks and only then considering what we are going to do with the bishop. So now we're going to look at another form of defending. So in the previous one we saw that black had to trade the rooks first, and in this position, right, it's very critical what black does. So after the move e6, right, the rook has 3 squares and cannot be forced away by the king anymore, and then white is winning, right? Again, the rook on b8 is tied up to the defense of b7. The king is on the back rank and cannot get rid of the rook on the 7th rank, and white can advance their pawns and bring the king. So this would be a losing move, and the way to draw this is by playing king f8 with the threat on the next move of king e8, and now the rook doesn't have enough space and has to return, and the position becomes a draw. So it's very critical that you don't create more space for the rook on the 7th rank, but then you can actually successfully defend if there are only 2 squares for the rook available, and force the rook back with the king in this case. So here we have another example, right? So we defend with rook c2, and after king f2, we bring the king and force the rook back. Again, there are only 2 squares available for the white rook. Sometimes, of course, right? So like in this case, after rook b8, that would be passive defense. And then we can never get rid of this rook because there are too many squares, right? The rook has 4 squares, so the king cannot force this rook away, and then white can bring their king and win the game. So we have to look for an active defense. So this active defense would be rook c8, allowing the pawn to be taken, and then bringing the king down and winning the pawn on a2 with an equal endgame. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you subscribe. We discussed rook activity, a rook very active on the 7th rank. We saw that basically it cannot be chased away by pawns, of course. It cramps the enemy pieces. It's in enemy territory. It jails the king often. It attacks the pawns on the 7th rank. And there are tactical possibilities by creating a mating attack, sometimes supported by forcing an opponent's piece to, you could say, the C or the F file, and sometimes supported by one of our own pieces. We saw the example of a pawn and a knight supporting the rooks on the 7th rank. And we also saw the positional advantage that the defender can become in a kind of a zugzwang because they are only tied up to the defense. The king cannot move away from the back rank, and the opponent can slowly but certainly expand their activity and bring their king. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again.